that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there and the face cloth which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her.
Good morning again, everybody. Happy Easter. If I haven't met you, I'm John. I've told a few of you about this before, but once I was catching a taxi in Malaysia. We were driving through the city and I was making polite chit-chat with the driver when we approached an intersection and the lights turned red. But instead of slowing down, the driver put his foot down and we went sailing through this intersection. I tensed up and I just thought, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And I just said to him, "Wow, you drive a little bit differently over here, don't you?" And he said to me, just with a broad, nonchalant smile, oh, don't worry, my brother has been driving taxis for 20 years and he always does this and he's never had an accident. Okay. A few minutes later, another red light, another foot on the accelerator, and sailing through we go. And this time, once I'd got a bit of breath in my lungs, I thought I'd need to speak a bit more directly to this guy. And he said, "Isn't this a bit dangerous?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry. My brother's been driving taxis for 20 years and he always does this and he's never had an accident." You can guess what's coming, can't you? Third red light, third acceleration, third panicked passenger. I'm composing a farewell letter to my children in my head, but I just couldn't get my thoughts together. And the same rationale. Oh, my brother's been driving taxis for 20 years and he always does this and he's never had an accident. Then in the distance, I see the biggest intersection I think I've ever seen. But I breathe a sigh of relief because our light is red and the other traffic going across is heavy and steady. I think, oh, there's no chance he will have to stop. But then as we approach the intersection, their light goes red and ours goes green. Oh, good. We will get through. I will get to where I'm going. I can get out of this cab before I die. But as we approach the intersection, to my shock and surprise, onto the brakes he goes. And the taxi shudders to a smoking halt. The car's behind us, bipping horns. And I turn to him and I say, "What are you doing? The light's green. We can go." And he turned to me with an angry face. And he said, "My brother has been driving taxis for 20 years. He might be coming the other way." There are times in life when we don't understand what is happening. But sometimes if you hang on, the gaps are filled, the dots are joined, and the strangest things begin to make an extraordinary sense. It's exactly that unexpected stuff that happens in life that can bring change for us. Something that breaks the pattern, when the lights change in a way that we don't anticipate, when the story refuses to go where you think it should go, it loosens our grip on stuff and we are opened to possibility. That's why comedy works. That's why jokes or stories work, that something happens unexpected. And this emotion that you're feeling of tension is released in laughter and joy. Steve spoke about that on Good Friday, if you were here. A joke is a powerful thing. That's why storytellers or writers often will use a joke to relax you and then give you a serious message that they want to bring to you. The old reformers, the 4 centuries ago, when they started an Easter sermon, would always start with a joke. These were very serious, churchy type people, but they weren't being sacrilegious. They understood that laughter is fitting for the Easter story because it's all about the unexpected. It's all about the release of tension, and that's why I started today with a joke. Joyful laughter brings freedom. Even in the most horrible of situations, it's a release. It heralds a new dawn for us. That's, in fact, what the English word Easter refers to. What we're going to do today is, I hope, just very simple. I hope today is a simple talk from me. We're just going to enter into the story. And we're going to do it by travelling alongside this woman, Mary. We're going to accompany her through 5 actions that she does in this story, 5 acts of action, and just see what this might say to us. So in Act 1, Mary walks. She walked to a tomb in devotion. It's still dark when Mary gets up and leaves her home. The city, Jerusalem, is quiet. It's a busy, bustling place, especially at Passover. But even now, the Roman garrison is in their beds and the Jewish leaders have done all their duties and the place is silent. And she moves through the city, outside the city walls, alone, or nearly so. In John's account of this story, he focuses just on Mary, but we know from the other Gospels, Mary doesn't go alone. There are other women travelling with her. But John's methodology as a storyteller is he wants us to experience what this one person goes through, that we might reflect upon it for ourselves. But isn't that how we feel in times of trauma, that we are all alone? Others can be around us, but the experience, like Mary is having, makes us feel incredibly alone. Isn't that the wrestle that we have when we come to terms with loss or with hardship? Something has to take place deep within us to process that internally. And it's the same with the journey towards faith, to belief, to understanding, to allegiance with God. It's something ultimately that you can only do on your own. It doesn't matter what your family or your friends are doing. You have to make your own choices. You must go that journey yourself. So John is asking us to accompany Mary on this journey as she goes to the tomb. So perhaps, like Mary, we can journey this confusing road. We might just pause and ask ourselves, what sort of person goes to a tomb in the darkness? Why would you do that? Mary's not going because she expects anything remarkable. She's going because she loves the man who's buried in the tomb. She loves Jesus. And this is a final action of love, of kindness, to treat his body with dignity. The Sabbath had prevented that happening when he was buried, and so she goes the next day on the Sunday morning to anoint his body with oils. This Mary appears in John's Gospel quite suddenly. The first time we read of her is in chapter 19, the chapter before this, in verse 25, where this woman he names Mary stands by the cross and watches Jesus die. The word that John uses, stood, doesn't just mean a posture. It means a devotion, a commitment to. And she will stand here at the tomb because she is committed to this Jesus. So she gets up before the sun and makes her way to his grave. She has come to grieve, to express her emotions. 4 times in this story, John writes of Mary weeping. She pours out her feelings. It's the kind of crying that takes over your whole body. I don't know if you've ever cried like that, just an uncontrollable sobbing that consumes your whole self. And I think this is how Mary is weeping as she sits or comes to sit at the tomb. But that's grief, isn't it? You can have these intense feelings, but life moves on. There's practical stuff you just got to do. And so she has to do the practical and ugly task of covering over a dead, brutalized body with spices and oils as an act of dignity for the man she cares for. I can imagine that Mary has been unable to sleep all night. She's just been waiting and waiting and waiting until she can go so that she's there as the sun comes up. But as Mary arrives, she is dumbfounded in what she sees. The stone that had been rolled across the tomb has been rolled back. We should feel the visceral wrongness of this. When a tomb was opened in the first century, it only meant one thing: robbers. Someone had violated this special place to take things, to take valuable things. And you can imagine the terror that she feels. After all they've done to him, now they do this. It's like a twisting of the knife that's already in her heart. Even in death will they not give this man any dignity. And so Mary does the most natural thing in the world. In such distress, she runs to find her friends. So in Act 2, Mary ran to find friends in distress. She runs to Simon Peter, John tells us, and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, which is most probably John the writer himself. He's being modest. Mary is distraught. She's breathless. She's in great distress. And so her reaction when she finally gets to these friends is quite sensible. She says to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we," those women she was with, "do not know where they have put him." Notice there's no thought here in Mary's mind that Jesus is somehow alive. There's no resurrection anticipation here. That just doesn't happen. Mary's seen people die before. There's no wish fulfillment. She hasn't understood any of that, like none of the disciples have understood that. And she says to these guys, "Please, at last, can you summon up some courage and be brave? You guys who deserted him when he was on the cross, as I stood by and waited till he breathed his last. Now at last, will you come and help me so that we can show some care for this Jesus?" And so Peter charges off, as Peter always does, because he's that sort of guy. And younger John races off with him, but he's younger and he's faster, and he gets there first. But he's perhaps not courageous enough to go in, and so Peter finally catches up and charges into the tomb. And there they see linen burial cloths lying where the body had been. And they notice something peculiar. The cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head is not just chucked across the room in a heap, but it's folded and placed carefully apart from the rest. That funny detail matters. If you're a grave robber, you're not doing that. If you're a disciple wanting to snatch the body of Jesus, you're not going to do that. This careful arrangement of the grave clothes speaks of an unhurried, considered departure. Something, in fact, like it's almost happened from within, that Jesus has come out of what he was shrouded in. He's just passed through and left behind those raiments. John writes that John sees the disciple whom Jesus loved, sees and believes, but what he actually believes, I don't know, because he still doesn't understand what's happened. But he believes something has happened. But then the most remarkable thing happens. Peter and John stand up and go back home. They go back to where they were staying in Jerusalem. These men run to act, but run away from their emotions and their confusion. They don't know what's happened, but they're not hanging around to find out. And so they miss the opportunity that Mary will get. These men cannot sit with their distress, with their emotions. Mary can. And so she has this opportunity to meet God, for God to meet her in her time of need. I don't know if you've had that sort of experience. I can think just last year there were some weeks that went by for me where I was incredibly distressed, and I lay on my bed on my own and just sobbed with that sort of sobbing. And I had to keep thinking, why? What's happening inside of you, John? Why these events that are happening, why are they so distressing to you? But as I thought on those things, that's when I encountered God's presence with me. That's when he came. And I'm just telling you, this is a fact. This is what happened to me. And this is what happened to Mary. There's a book, I think I've mentioned it to you before, by Tim Winton called Irie, which is the Greek word for peace. And he says this: it is much easier to fill a void than contemplate it. When there's a vacuum, a void, we fill it in with stuff. When you feel that emptiness, we doom scroll on our phones, or we binge watch Netflix, or we drink too much, or we do all sorts of things to fill that emptiness. But maybe if we stop and sit with the feelings and contemplate them, it's much more helpful. And this is what Mary does. She sits. She sits. Mary had dropped out of view in the story, but then we realise she's running back to the tomb as well. She is there. Peter and John, brave fellows that they are, leave her there to cry, to weep, to sob. But it's her staying that changes everything for her. So Act 3, Mary stood weeping in confusion. There is a shocking gap in the universe. This stone has left an empty tomb, a void. And Mary doesn't know what's happened. She is at a loss within herself. She doesn't now know what to do in life now that Jesus has gone, has died. What does it all mean? And so Mary bends over herself to look in the tomb. Perhaps she hopes maybe he's hiding in the back corner or something. I don't know what she hopes. Maybe she's just missed something that will explain things to her. And as she bends over, she sees two figures in white seated where the body of Jesus had been. One is at the head, says John, and one is at the feet. How Mary reacted to seeing two angels, I don't know. I don't know if you've ever seen an angel. You would expect John to write, if you're a biblical writer, and Mary was greatly astonished. And the angel said, "Fear not," because that's what angels always say. John doesn't mention Mary's reaction. He mentions where they're sitting. And you think, why put that detail in? What's that about? That one is at the head and one is at the foot. It's because John knows his First Testament, his Old Testament. And John is describing something in symbolism to give explanation to the events that are occurring. In Exodus 25, when Moses is given instructions about how to make the Ark of the Covenant, the box in which the Ten Commandments will sit in the middle of the tabernacle or in the middle of the temple, that the great high priest would come into once a year to make offering over the mercy seat, there was to be two angels, one at the head, one at the foot of the box. John is saying, and you read all through his gospel, he uses the furniture of the tabernacle and the temple to symbolize things in the story of Jesus' life. And John is saying this is the new mercy seat. This empty bench is the place where atonement is made. Here is where God's presence to forgive and to heal is experienced. And that's what the angels are watching over, this empty space where God has accomplished through the resurrection of Jesus all that he wants to do. It's a theological picture. Death itself has been defeated. And John says, this is how I want you to understand these events. And so we must ask ourselves, is that how I understand these events? What do I really think about this Jesus dying and rising? Do I believe it or not believe it? John says he believed it, but he didn't really understand it in the gospel. What about us? How do we make sense of this? What does it mean to you? Or is it just a joke? Or is it the joke that turns everything upside down and brings understanding? Mary, of course, has no idea about any of this. She's just a grief-stricken woman peering into a tomb. And then the angels say what angels seem to have the habit of doing. They ask her a really strange question. They say, "Woman, why are you crying?" Have you ever been to a funeral? People are crying. You imagine walking up and say, "Why are you crying?" Like, hello? Maybe angels are a bit on the spectrum. I need to go and do a pastoral care course. Like, what a stupid question. Why would she not be crying? The person that she loves has just died. But they don't ask the question to be offensive. They ask her as an invitation to voice out what she is thinking and fearing so that she might have a different understanding. And she says to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." This is where she's up to. And then something amazing happens. She turns away from the angels and she becomes conscious of another figure, someone else there in the background, someone she doesn't recognize. And this figure, as she weeps, asks her the same question. "Woman, why are you weeping?" And then adds, "Whom do you seek here?" Often in John's Gospel, this idea of seeking, whom do you seek, is about what are you really after in life. That's how Jesus uses that question. What do you really want? Her hopes are about to be realised. Who is this figure? What happens? And this is where we get into the joke, because stuff happens here. It's a comedy in the midst of tragedy. We, the readers, understand who this figure is, but Mary does not. She doesn't recognise Jesus as the very one she wants to find. She's not expecting to see him. Maybe her eyes are not focused because she's weeping. Maybe she's not facing him. Maybe his body looks different. We read that he retains the scars in hands and side. Maybe his face is also beaten up and brutalised. Maybe he's got a nose across his face. His back has been ripped apart with a whip. Maybe Jesus appears differently in his resurrected body. Whatever the case, she doesn't know who this person is, and she thinks he is the gardener. Obvious thing to think. There early, who would be there in a cemetery? But the person who looks after the cemetery, the gardener. That's why we have our little garden entrance here this morning. And so she asks the gardener, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I will take him away." Mary says she's going to pick up this dead body and carry it somewhere. I'm not quite sure how she thinks she's going to do that, but that's what she wants to do. She refused to be deterred by logistics. She wants the body of Jesus. And this body that she's been looking for says one more word. And on one word, the whole story changes. Here is the punchline to the joke. "Mary," says Jesus. Mary, her name. And as Jesus says her name, she hears it in a way that triggers her memory. I know that sound. I know that voice. And so she looks. It's Jesus. She turns toward him and uses the name that she uses, Rabboni, Aramaic teacher. That's who you are to me. You are my teacher. An amazing thing in the first century for a woman to be a disciple. No rabbi had disciples except for Jesus. The only one in history who allowed a woman to be taught as a disciple. And this is the special name that she has for him. Teacher. Each of my kids call me different things. We had some honest conversation this morning. But it sort of says something about our relationship. So that one usually will call me Dad, another one will call me Pops. One always calls me Johnny. The other one says Old Man. And the one that gets me the most is when I hear Father, in the mocking inverted commas, Father. Oh, gee, what have I done now? When God calls our name, when he says your name, it's not just, I know what your name is, it's I know you. I know who you are. And that's what Jesus is saying to Mary. Mary, I know who you are. And she says to him, Rabboni, Teacher, I know who you are. This is how we can know God. He knows us. We can know him. Mary, without any shame, just leaps on Jesus and grabs hold of him. This body is not a ghost. It's not an apparition. It's a physical body that can be hugged, can be touched, with which she can have intimacy and tenderness. And John says the next words, stop, don't cling on to me. I don't think Jesus was one of those guys that, a 3-second hug is 2 seconds too long. I don't think that's his problem. The King James Version has touch me not. That's how rude and offensive. That's not Jesus. She is touching him. She's saying, Jesus says, stop clinging on to me. I don't know how long she was hanging on. Not because Jesus doesn't like to be touched. It's because he hasn't finished doing what he's doing. Don't hold on to me. But you can totally understand Mary's reaction. She's lost this Jesus, and now she's found him, and she's not going to let him go. She is desperate to hang on to him. Wherever he goes, she'll go too. But Jesus says he must. And he gives a theological reason. And just hang in there with this bit. Jesus says his ascension to the Father is still in process. It's still happening. In the Greek version, it's present tense. I am ascending to my Father. And again, we need some understanding of what is happening here. The letter to the Hebrews helps us. The high priest would come in to the Holy of Holies and bring the offering that would allow people to come in by means of what God had provided. And the writer to the Hebrews says this is what Jesus is to us. He is something that God has provided to make a way open. He acts as a high priest and brings to God, the very presence of God, something that sets all of us free to enter in freely to the presence of God. Jesus says, this is what I'm doing. I need to bring my offering and intercede for you as a great high priest. That's how he prayed back in chapter 17 in that upper room. This is the heavenly reality that Mary as yet does not grasp. It's not that touching is bad. It's that I'm not any longer to be known by you in this way. In the upper room, remember if you were here a couple of weeks ago, Jesus said, it's to your advantage that I go away. While I'm with you like this, I'm only in one place at one time. I'm limited by the physicality of the incarnation. But when I go to the Father, I will send the Spirit and I will be with everyone every day, wherever they are. You can know my presence. This is what I'm doing here. So don't hang on to your old ways, Mary. Things are shifting. And this is good news for us because this is the discipleship that we experience that Mary has to adjust to. Notice what Jesus says next to them. He doesn't say to Mary, hey, Mary, I've just beaten death. Good news for you, when you die, it's not the end. What a beauty. He doesn't say, go to the disciples and say, hey, you can have eternal life when you die. You can go to heaven. That's not what he says at all. Jesus says this, go to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Jesus says, my Father, the relationship I have with God, you can now enter. My God, the God I know, is to be your God. And you are to know him as I know him. Yes, the resurrection does for us provide for this life after death, but that's not the focus in the New Testament. That is not the Christian hope. The Christian hope is that the new creation has begun now. Jesus is the first piece of the puzzle to be put right. And so the Christian hope is to know God with us now, in the present, to experience the resurrected Jesus now. Yes, and in fullness when we die. But here it has begun. It creates a new family, a new community, a new set of relationships. That's what Jesus prayed about in that prayer, that high priestly prayer, that we would love one another as he has loved us, that we would treat each other with dignity and respect and forbearance and love. That's resurrection life. We aren't escapees from the world waiting for heaven. We're the opposite. We are embodying the presence of Christ, the risen Christ, with us now. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that Christ's place on earth has been taken by his body, the church. This is where God's presence must be seen and evidenced. We are to live that out. Often when we think of Jesus' ascension, we feel it, I think, like Mary felt it, as a loss. I would prefer to have Jesus sitting in the seat there so I could have a chat to him face to face, and that would be really nice. But Jesus says, no, you don't understand. Me going away is to your advantage. I'm going to my Father who becomes your Father. My Spirit will be in you. And so I can be with you when you are grieving, or when you are hungry, or when you are tired, or when you fail. My presence is to be known with you. That's our living relationship with the ascended Christ. That he speaks to us like he spoke to Mary, through the scripture that he's left for us, through his Spirit within us, through the community of his people. He keeps teaching us and leading us. I don't know if you've had that experience. For me, it started when I was 16. I sat again on my bed and I opened a book I'd never touched before, and I started to read. It's the story of Jesus, the Bible. And as I read these words, it came alive to me. And I thought, this man is different to any other man I know. And these words speak to me in a way that just resonates with me. And so slowly, it came alive. And I realised this God is real. It's not just a funny idea. It's not just the weakness of people who need a religion. This God is real. And he can know me. Mary couldn't see clearly through her tears, but she could hear. Our faith, Jesus will say to Thomas in the next instalment, is better when it doesn't come by seeing but by hearing. When we hear the testimony and believe, this is a strong faith. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed, Jesus says to Thomas. This is Mary's experience as well as seeing. So finally, to finish the story, what does Mary do? After all that's happened, where does John take us in her journey? This, I guess, in some ways is the punchline, the meaning of the story. And it's a strange one. Mary goes to the other disciples, to the other apostles, and she is the one who is the witness to the resurrection. She is the sent one. That's what the word apostle means, to the sent ones. Angeloi is the word for angel. They are messengers. She becomes the messenger to the apostles. It is through Mary that the church is born. She is the first apostle, which again is very inconvenient if you're writing this story in the first century. Jewish tradition gave no weight to a woman's testimony. Roman law said women cannot appear in court. If you're making up a story, you don't make a woman as your key witness. But all four Gospels talk about Mary as the first one. Why? Because it's inconveniently true. This is what happened. But John celebrates that it's a woman who first meets the risen Christ, that it's the woman who first tells the Easter story of the new dawn. She is the main character besides Jesus in this story. John and Peter are just footnotes. They're just hanging around. It's Mary and Mary's experience that John is lifting up for us. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. I don't know how Mary felt when she did that. I'm sure she was a mix of emotions, trying to get her head around what had happened. I don't know whether she thought they would believe her or ridicule her, but they laugh and dismiss her, but she goes anyway. Because that's what faithful disciples do. They go. And so for me, Mary is an encouragement. Sometimes I get a bit timid to tell other people, a bit embarrassed. You know, I go to a party and people say, what do you do for a job? And I think, oh no, here we go. It's going to be out in the open. Just go anyway. Have you ever had that experience? You want to tell someone how important this is to you and you think, I just don't have the words, I can't explain it. I'll stuff it up and I'll ruin the friendship, and just go anyway. That's what a faithful disciple does. This is what I've heard and seen. That's all you need to do. That's what Mary does. She proclaims. So let's finish up where we started, back in the darkness. Mary walks a journey that I think many of you know. Some of you have walked to tombs in devotion. Some of you have kept faith where it costs something. Some of you turn up when others go home, and that's a hard place to be. Some of us have run to friends in distress when we ourselves feel overwhelmed and bewildered and not knowing what to do with what we're feeling. And some of you have stood weeping in confusion. What is life about now? What do I do now? The dawn of Easter does not promise a life without grief. Mary wept, and Jesus doesn't say, no weeping. He says, why are you weeping? How do you process that emotion in light of the bigger picture? In this life we will have trouble, tribulation, says Jesus. You will have it, but fear not. I have overcome the world. Karl Barter, another theologian, says, Christian joy is a defiant nevertheless. The whole story of Easter is a nevertheless. Death and suffering and evil happen. Nevertheless, there is a new dawn. And that's the good news of Easter for us. We also can experience life beginning to be put right. Life beginning to be put back into better order now and in the age to come. Jesus knows your name and he calls you. Come. I am here waiting to be with you. Will you come and call me Rabboni, teacher? Let's pray together. Lord, it's a journey, the Easter story and our lives. We thank you that the message that you bring to us corresponds to the harsh realities of our world. It doesn't pretend things are other than they are. So we thank you that in the midst of all the circumstances we go through, the message